Hey guys, what's going on? First one I got for you is Other Days, Other Eyes by Bob Shaw. This one revolves around a singular piece of technology called retardite, which is essentially a pane of glass that light travels very slowly through. So it records whatever it's in front of. And at first I thought Bob Shaw had predicted the video camera. But of course this was written in 1972, and the video camera far predates that. But Bob Shaw did predict the abundance of these cameras out in public and the reality where you're never sure if you're being recorded or not. In the book, the technology is invented accidentally and at first used mainly for entertainment. People will import a piece of retardite from the Caribbean and put it in their living room so they have this beautiful view of a tropical sunset. And then later they realize that all of these video cameras out in the world can help them solve crimes, and the technology takes on a much more serious purpose. There's a few high-tension scenes where everyone's gathered in front of a specific piece of retardite and waiting for that moment where it shows if or if not a potential murderer passes by, and the sentence is going to be determined based on what is shown there. And if this one random crime show I saw recently can be trusted, that is apparently how a lot of police work is done today. They, especially in a big city, they go around and see what kind of ring cameras are in the area or any other traffic camera. And they go through and they try and find where the person ran to or where they came from. And I don't want to spoil this book, but there probably will be minor spoilers. That is the dystopia that Bob Shaw predicts in this book. This is not a good thing, that there's cameras everywhere, even if they are helping people be safer and solving crimes, because if it comes at the expense of people's privacy, then it's not worth it. Which I agree with, and it's interesting how we just kind of settled into this reality where there are cameras everywhere. And in this book, there is one big defining moment when it happens all at once, and it is this tragic thing. But here in our world, we're all just kind of accustomed to it by now. That ending was kind of lackluster. I'm almost certain this was a fix-up novel because it was a bit disjointed. And the conclusion kind of came out of nowhere because the problem that it solves only came into the story about 3/4 of the way through. So it had some pacing issues, and it's a massive perpetrator of a cardinal sin for me. The cover art has nothing to do with the story. I'll put it over here, but they don't travel back in time. It's the classic thing where, okay, sure, you can kind of look back in time, but only if you had a piece of retardite there at the time, which they didn't in 1678 or 1256, 34 BC. They never go back in time. They never see cavemen or this Renaissance stuff. So why put it on there? It's a cool piece of art, but it's very misleading. Oh, something interesting about this book. They used a practical method of ad block and they straight up ripped it out of the book, which I think is pretty awesome. And it also got me thinking about people who are trying to quit smoking, but every piece of science fiction you pick up, on page 67, there you go, instant craving for a cigarette. That's pretty rough. Also, apparently this book is worth more than $100, which I didn't realize until afterwards, and I'm glad about because I was reading this very aggressively. When you're trying to feed a baby and read at the same time, you're kind of mangling the spine to be able to read inside the margins. And I would have been a lot more worried about it if I knew its worth. Not that I'm ever going to sell it, since I just read it. It will go on my shelf forever. All in all, a pretty forgettable book, but it was pretty prophetic, so I'm going to give it 2 different ratings for this video. Next up, we got Recalled to Life by Robert Silverberg. I've said in the past that this guy never misses, but I may have to rescind that statement because this one was kind of dull. By page 100, all you really know is that reincarnation is real. Somebody figured out how to do it. And they've hired some sort of failed political figure to head the PR on the technology because they know people are going to be resistant to it. So they've hired this guy to try and ease it into the public sector. And that's it. And there's none of the Silverberg spunk that generally gets you through the boring parts of the book, if you know what I mean. And this book desperately needed it. I actually read the introduction to this one, which I don't normally do, And in it, Silverberg is saying it was really hard to sell this novel. He went through a bunch of different publishers, and they were all kind of like, thanks, but no thanks, which is a weird way to introduce your book. And I know why, because it was dull, and there wasn't a lot of science fiction in it, and there wasn't a lot of Silverberg intrigue in it. And by the end, still, all he does is introduce the idea of resurrection, not complete resurrection. The body still has to be intact, and you have to get him to the facilities in a certain amount of time. Say a drowning victim would be a good culprit for this. And he's dabbled in some of the different takes that people would have religiously, socially. Apparently Catholics have an issue with the soul. If you die, your soul leaves your body. So does the soul come back, or are you left soulless? That's kind of an interesting idea. I finished this book without too much involvement in it, and it took a while to percolate in my mind to realize that I am the villain of this book. Obviously, there's not like a traditional villain, but it's a public opinion. And ultimately, my opinion would be to suppress this technology. It didn't seem like something good. There were like vague notions in my head about the balance of life and death. But mostly it's the implementation and the inevitability that some human would have to make the decision which 12-year-old boy to revive, which 12-year-old drowning victim to revive. And that's just a choice that humans probably shouldn't make, that we probably shouldn't have the ability to make. And there's also other side effects of the procedure in this book that I won't spoil. But ultimately, my response was, yeah, I don't think this technology is right. I think it should just remain undiscovered, which of course was never an option because you can't put the lid back on Pandora's box. Once the technology is out there, it's out there. So you got to deal with it. You can't just ignore it or turn a blind eye to it. And I realize that now, after reading it and thinking about it for a while, that my opinion was wrong. And it kind of highlighted my current position as a new parent, craving stability. I think as you get older, inevitably you crave stability more and more because you become more fragile. You're in a very fragile state if you're trying to start a new family. So let's keep the status quo. Let's not shake things up. This seems like it could get kind of spicy. Let's just forget about it. But again, that's not an option. And it never was. So that was a bit of a selfish, unrealistic opinion that I had in me that Silverberg managed to flush out. Change is the only constant. I've said that here before on the channel. Although I have a hard time crediting Silverberg for that because all he did was come up with the idea of resurrection and just say, yeah, how would people respond to that? That's really all you needed to do to kind of provoke the thoughts that I had. The book was dry, it lasted too long, it didn't do enough. There was a lot of room to explore some interesting resurrections. The main one he does here is a inheritance where the children of a very rich man are upset about how he doled out his riches, and you're questioning whether or not they're going to resurrect him to try and change his mind. And that storyline goes on way too long and never really goes anywhere. So this one might get a low score both in overall enjoyment and prophetically because he doesn't predict anything except fear and ignorance still being prevalent in the future, which of course it is. But best part about this book is the cover. Again, I'll put it over there. This is everything I want in a vintage science fiction cover. The color scheme is perfect, and I guess it's not misleading because, sure, that could have been what the procedure looked like. It certainly wasn't ever described that way with these purple tentacles wrapping around a body and touching some sort of electrode, but I'll go with it. This was on my TBO for a long time, to be ogled, because, again, peak vintage science fiction art right there. Okay, lastly, we got The Dream Master by Roger Zelazny. I read Lord of Light a long time ago, and I have vague memories of being confused. I got very little out of that book. It seems like Zelazny is big into mythology and different religions, and I am not so much. So he had all of these different characters that I probably should have known more about, but I knew nothing about. So that was already strike one, and this is definitely strike two, maybe strike 2 and 3. Not sure I'm going to go back to Zelazny. This one centers around a technology where a psychoanalyst can create a dream for somebody and they both experience it, and this is how the patient is diagnosed. And through the dream, they're both diagnosed and cured by whatever interesting abstract concept the person can come up with. And I was hooked at the beginning. It opens up on a very confusing scene, and it seems like Zelazny is kind of reveling in the fact of how confused you are and offers you no lifelines. Okay, it's called Dream Master, so you know you're in a dream, but still, I had no idea what was going on. Help me out a little bit here. But I was into it, and I would have been fine if you just went through a couple different cases, the dream you create, how it solves whatever the neuroses of the patient is. I was down for that. But that's not what we get. This was a short story that won the Nebula, I'm pretty sure. And it seems like Zelazny kind of wanted to ride the momentum of that award and rush out a novella, but he didn't change the narrative arc to fit a longer story. It seems like he kept that short story arc and tacked on a lot of baggage. So it read very bloated, very convoluted. You're bouncing around to these different storylines, some pieces of writing that I'm not sure were even meant to be in this book. He's got a minor storyline with his wife, a minor storyline with his son, neither of which really makes sense in relation to the main story. He has a few small tidbits of a world saturated with information, kind of weighed down with information, where the main character is writing a speech for a college commencement or something, talking about how technology can hurt people. And I wish he had explored that a little bit, because that is certainly prophetic, totally unrelated to the main idea of this book, but one I would have liked to see flushed out. It also predicts self-driving cars, and it predicts talking dogs. Wait, no, not that one. So a lot of cool ideas in here, but it's just a kind of jumbled mess of scenes, if I'm honest. The ending was pretty cool. I kind of expected to have no idea what was going on at the end, to just be left with this okay moment, but it was a twist that I understood. Would I recommend it? No. Is it going to be on the bottom of my list at the end of the year? Almost certainly yes. Am I being dense and missing a piece of genius literature? Maybe. If you think so, let me know. And that's what I got for you today. So, as always, thanks for watching. Subscribe if you haven't. Oh, I wanted to shout out another channel. The guy's doing something very similar to me. He reads similar books, kind of this free form. Just here's what I thought about it. Barely Human is the channel name. I'll link it up here in the description below. Check him out. If you've gotten this far in the video, first of all, thank you. Second of all, you'll probably like that channel as well. Again, thanks for watching. See you next time. Bye-bye. Other Days, Other Eyes by Bob Shaw. The Dream Master by Roger Zelazny.